In 1943, the Eastern Front was a landscape of terror. Nazi officers ruled towns like kings, their every order sealing the fate of civilians and soldiers alike. Among them was Wilhelm Kube, one of the highest-ranking Nazi officials in occupied Belarus, feared, ruthless, and seemingly untouchable. No soldier could simply walk into his mansion. No sniper could reach him from a distance. The Gestapo guarded every hallway, every staircase, every window. Yet a young woman did. She wore no uniform, carried no army, and wielded no rifle. She was a maid. Her name was Yelena Mazanik. The Nazis saw her as invisible. The Soviet partisans saw her as a weapon. One carefully placed bomb would change everything. Born in Belarus in 1924, Yelena grew up amid the hardships of Soviet life, not extraordinary at first glance, but with a sharp mind, quick reflexes, and courage beyond her years. When the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union reached Belarus, she saw neighbors disappear, families slaughtered, and towns burned. The brutality of occupation transformed ordinary citizens into soldiers of a hidden war. Yelena's path was set. She would join the Soviet underground, using stealth and cunning rather than guns and artillery. Her skill would not be measured in hundreds of kills, but in the precision of a single, impossible strike. By 1942, partisan networks in Belarus were desperate for inside operatives. The plan to assassinate Wilhelm Kube, the ruthless SS general of Minsk, required someone who could gain direct access to Kube's mansion, avoid suspicion from guards and Gestapo, deliver a fatal device without being detected. Yelena's attributes made her the perfect candidate: young and unassuming, able to blend into civilian work, intelligent, observant, and fearless. Her recruitment wasn't just a volunteer opportunity, it was a death sentence if she failed, yet she accepted immediately. She understood that the odds were slim, but the impact of success could save thousands of lives under Nazi terror. Before entering the mansion, Yelena underwent clandestine training with Soviet partisan operatives, learning to handle explosives in secret, observing Nazi patrol patterns and guards' routines, understanding timing, precision, and patience, because even a fraction of a second mistake would be fatal. Practicing concealment, disguise, and subtle sabotage. This was not combat training with rifles or grenades thrown on the battlefield. It was infiltration training, the art of being invisible while carrying death in your hands. Every lesson reinforced one immutable truth: she could die at any moment, and no one would come to save her. Before the Kube operation, Yelena conducted small-scale assignments to prove her capabilities. Delivering messages under enemy scrutiny, smuggling intelligence from Nazi offices to partisan command, observing and reporting troop movements without leaving a trace, sabotaging supply depots in stealth operations. Each successful mission increased her confidence and earned the trust of partisan leaders. More importantly, each success proved that a civilian could operate in the heart of the enemy's stronghold. The Nazis saw her as just another maid, another face in the crowd. She was anything but ordinary. By late 1943, the operation was ready. Yelena's role was clear: disguise yourself as domestic help, gain access to Kube's private quarters, place a bomb where it would be fatal but undetectable, leave without arousing suspicion. Every step required perfect timing, nerves of steel, and a mind capable of staying calm under imminent death. The Nazi guards were ruthless, trained to detect the slightest irregularity. One mistake, a dropped tray, a fumbled key, or even a look too long, could mean immediate execution. Yet Yelena prepared herself mentally as she had on the mountains, in snow and in the sniper's shadow. Focus on the mission, ignore fear, and act with precision.
This would be her first time carrying a weapon of mass disruption disguised as a simple package, and the success of her entire network depended on it. What makes Yelena Mazanik extraordinary is not only what she did, but who she was while doing it. A young woman blending in with domestic staff, smiling, serving, cleaning, while planning the death of one of the most dangerous men in Nazi-occupied Belarus, living each day in constant fear of discovery, yet never hesitating, never faltering. Her courage was invisible until the moment it became lethal. Her heroism lay not in killing indiscriminately, but in changing the course of occupation with one decisive act. Yelena Mazanik has been recruited and trained. She has proven herself in minor missions and intelligence gathering. She is now inside Kube's mansion, ready to execute a mission that seems impossible.
Once inside Wilhelm Kube's mansion, Yelena Mazanik entered a world of constant danger. Every corridor had the potential for discovery. Every glance from a Nazi officer could reveal her secret. Every routine task, sweeping, cleaning, arranging linens, carried the weight of espionage. She was not just a maid, she was a living instrument of resistance, invisible to the enemy, yet fully aware of the deadly stakes. The mansion was a fortress disguised as a home. Guards patrolled hallways, officers demanded absolute obedience, and the Gestapo monitored all movement. The smallest mistake could trigger immediate execution. And yet, she adapted seamlessly. Yelena's days followed a carefully orchestrated rhythm. Observation under the guise of service. While polishing furniture or preparing meals, she memorized layouts, guard rotations, and escape routes. Intelligence gathering. She recorded the comings and goings of Nazi officers, noting troop movements, communication lines, and security weaknesses. Maintaining a facade. She smiled, obeyed orders, and performed her duties without raising suspicion, hiding her lethal purpose behind a veil of civility. Mental preparation. Each evening, she reviewed her observations, calculated risks, and visualized the assassination plan in meticulous detail. The mansion became a chessboard, and Yelena Mazanik was always 3 moves ahead, despite appearing passive and unassuming. Life inside the mansion was a test of patience, nerve, and resolve. She witnessed casual cruelty toward locals by officers and guards. She overheard brutal conversations about executions and reprisals. Any hint of rebellion among servants was punished swiftly. Yet Yelena remained calm, converting fear into determination. Each day of service built the mental fortitude she needed to carry out one of the most audacious partisan operations of the war. Her survival depended on invisibility, her success on patience, and her courage on relentless focus. Before attempting Kube's assassination, Yelena carried out smaller sabotage operations. Misplacing documents, shuffling important papers, subtly delaying Nazi orders. Concealed messages, smuggling intelligence to partisan contacts hidden in everyday household items. Observation reports, detailing officer schedules and guard shifts with meticulous accuracy. Each successful act reinforced trust with the partisans and gave Yelena confidence in her abilities. It also strengthened her reputation as a civilian who could move unseen through the heart of the Nazi command structure.
The mansion was not only physical danger, it was a battlefield of psychological tension. Officers and guards were unpredictable. Small mistakes could result in interrogation, imprisonment, or death. Yelena had to maintain a balance between visible obedience and covert resistance. Every smile, every task, every idle conversation was part of her disguise, part of the larger strategy. The Nazis assumed her compliance meant loyalty. The partisans knew that her apparent submission hid a mind calculating every move, every risk, every moment to strike. During these months of infiltration, she memorized Kube's daily routines, which room he slept in, the timing of his guard rotations, and the placement of his personal belongings. She identified weaknesses in mansion security that no one else noticed. She coordinated with partisans outside the city to ensure the timing of the assassination would be perfect. Every detail mattered. A single misstep would not only mean her death, but could also jeopardize the entire partisan network in the region. By the winter of 1943, Yelena was no longer just a maid. She had transformed into a master of concealment, able to blend into the background while performing lethal reconnaissance. A strategist, understanding how minor manipulations could produce maximum disruption. A silent instigator whose work would change the course of Nazi operations in Belarus. Her courage was no longer theoretical. It was tested daily by the proximity to danger, the constant surveillance, and the potential for immediate death. With each passing day, the plan for Kube's assassination crystallized. Every observation, every minor sabotage, and every report became part of a single, deadly purpose. The mental strain was immense. One false move could destroy everything she had worked for. Yelena's life became a delicate balancing act, perform her duties flawlessly while preparing for an act that would kill one of the highest-ranking Nazis in Belarus. It was the ultimate test of courage, intellect, and nerve. And she was ready. By September 1943, the plan to eliminate Wilhelm Kube had reached its final stage. This was not just an assassination. It was a strategic strike designed to fracture Nazi command in Belarus and ignite hope among the resistance. Kube was not merely an officer. He was the architect of terror, responsible for mass executions, deportations, and the annihilation of entire villages. If he lived, thousands more would die. If he fell, the entire occupation structure would tremble. And the only person positioned to make that happen was a maid. Unlike battlefield bombs or artillery shells, the weapon entrusted to Yelena Mazanik was compact, precise, and devastating. A timed explosive device engineered by Soviet partisans to fit inside everyday household items, evade detection, deliver fatal force without requiring Yelena to remain nearby. It was small enough to be concealed beneath clothing or hidden inside cleaning supplies, yet powerful enough to collapse a room. But carrying it inside the mansion was not merely dangerous, it was nearly suicidal. Any unexpected inspection, any sudden order from an officer, any random search could expose her instantly. And exposure meant not just death, but torture, reprisals, and the destruction of the entire partisan network. The morning of the operation dawned like any other. Sunlight filtered through the windows of the mansion. Guards rotated shifts. Servants prepared meals. Officers passed through hallways, absorbed in their routines. But for Yelena Mazanik, this was the last normal morning of her life. She had already accepted the truth. There was no guarantee she would survive the day. Yet she showed no outward sign of fear. She cleaned, she served, she obeyed, all while carrying death in silence. Every step toward Kube's quarters was a calculated risk. She passed armed SS guards who barely acknowledged her, officers discussing executions over breakfast, hallways that echoed with boots and commands. Each movement required perfect composure. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm. Her mind raced,
but her hands remained steady. The art of survival inside the enemy's stronghold lay not in speed, but in normalcy. She had become so convincing as a servant that the very people she intended to destroy saw her as insignificant. That illusion would become their undoing. Kube's bedroom was heavily guarded, yet domestic staff were allowed entry for cleaning and maintenance. Yelena timed her entry perfectly, when guards were rotating, when officers were distracted, when surveillance was minimal. The room itself reflected the arrogance of power. Fine furniture, luxurious fabrics, personal items of a man who believed himself untouchable. And beneath that luxury, Yelena would place his death.
She moved to Kube's bed. Every second felt like an eternity. She reached beneath the mattress and carefully positioned the explosive device exactly as trained. No hesitation, no shaking, no second thought. Once placed, there was no turning back. If discovered now, she would die within minutes. If not discovered, the device would detonate when Kube returned that night. A maid had just rewritten the fate of Nazi Belarus. Leaving the room was as dangerous as entering it. She retraced her steps calmly, resisting every instinct to rush. Every movement had to appear routine. Every glance had to be neutral. She passed guards. She passed officers. She passed servants, unaware that death now waited behind them. And she walked out, alive, undetected. Late that night, Wilhelm Kube returned to his quarters. Confident, unaware, secure in the belief that his position and power made him invincible. When he lay down in his bed, he sealed his fate. The explosion tore through the room, killing him instantly. One of the highest-ranking Nazi officials in occupied Soviet territory was dead, killed not by soldiers, not by artillery, but by a woman disguised as a servant. The assassination sent shockwaves through Nazi command. Gestapo units sealed the city. Mass interrogations began. Servants were arrested, tortured, executed. Security protocols collapsed under fear. The Nazis could not comprehend how their fortress had been breached so completely. The truth was unbearable. They had been defeated by invisibility, by patience, by a woman they had refused to see. More devastating than Kube's death was what it represented. The occupiers were no longer safe. Even their most protected leaders were vulnerable. The resistance could strike anywhere. The assassination emboldened partisan operations across Belarus and beyond. It became proof that the Nazis were not invincible, and that civilians, especially women, were not powerless. While chaos engulfed the Nazi apparatus, Yelena Mazanik vanished into the underground. She did not seek recognition. She did not seek glory. She had completed her mission, and she had done what entire armies failed to accomplish, removing a central pillar of Nazi terror from the heart of occupied territory.
The assassination of Wilhelm Kube did not bring immediate silence. It brought chaos. The morning after the explosion, Minsk awoke under siege. Nazi banners still hung from buildings, but their authority had been wounded. The death of one of their most powerful administrators shattered the illusion of control they so carefully maintained. The Gestapo moved swiftly and brutally. Streets were sealed, entire neighborhoods locked down, homes searched without warning, civilians dragged into interrogations. The Nazis could not accept that a maid had destroyed one of their own. To them, such a blow demanded punishment on a massive scale. In the days that followed, the occupiers unleashed terror. Servants from Kube's mansion were arrested en masse. Suspect partisans were executed publicly.
Informants were coerced through torture. Entire families disappeared overnight. The Nazi logic was simple. If fear could not prevent the assassination, it would punish it so savagely that no one would ever dare repeat it. But this brutality only hardened resistance. For every execution, new recruits joined the underground. For every burned village, the resolve of the people intensified. Kube's death had ignited something the Nazis could not extinguish. While Nazi fury raged through Minsk, Yelena Mazanik had already vanished. Her escape was not dramatic or cinematic. It was quiet, calculated, and brilliant. She moved through partisan-controlled routes, changed identity, avoided major transport routes, and disappeared into the countryside where Soviet networks operated. Unlike many operatives who were captured in the immediate chaos after missions, Yelena's ability to remain unseen once again saved her life. Her invisibility, the very trait that allowed her to assassinate Kube, allowed her to survive afterward. The Gestapo interrogated dozens. They tortured servants. They executed suspects, but they never found her. Why? Because she left no trace, had no known associations, maintained perfect discipline before and after the mission, and had been protected by a tightly organized partisan structure. Yelena Mazanik was not reckless. She was not flamboyant. She was methodical. And that discipline kept her alive. As Soviet forces advanced and liberated Minsk in 1944, the truth of Kube's assassination emerged fully. Yelena Mazanik was revealed not just as an operative, but as one of the most successful female assassins of the war. The Soviet Union honored her with Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest military distinction, the Order of Lenin, and national recognition for her contribution to the liberation effort. Her story was no longer secret. It became legend. But unlike many heroes who stood atop tanks or led battalions, Yelena's victory had come through silence, patience, and one perfectly executed strike. Kube was not merely symbolic. His assassination disrupted Nazi administrative control in Belarus, weakened SS command structure, forced redeployment of security resources, and allowed partisan operations to expand dramatically. More importantly, it proved that no Nazi leader was untouchable, even inside their most guarded spaces. This psychological blow echoed far beyond Minsk. Across occupied Europe, resistance movements saw that a civilian could kill a general, a woman could dismantle Nazi authority, and terror could be turned back against its creators. While the world celebrated her success, Yelena carried the weight of what followed. Innocents suffered in Nazi reprisals. Servants were executed. Entire families paid the price. She never denied the pain that followed her mission, but she never doubted its necessity. In war, even perfect victories come stained with tragedy, and she understood that better than most. By the war's later stages, Yelena Mazanik was no longer just a former maid. She became a symbol of female resistance, proof that women were not only victims, but decisive agents of victory. A reminder that intelligence and courage could defeat brute force. Her story was told not in numbers of kills, but in the collapse of an entire Nazi command node. Few soldiers could claim such impact.
When the war ended, Yelena Mazanik did not return to applause-filled halls or victory parades. She returned to silence. Unlike soldiers whose heroism was visible on battlefields, her war had been fought in corridors, bedrooms, kitchens, and shadows, places history often struggles to remember. For years after the war, she lived quietly in the Soviet Union, far removed from the public image of war heroes that dominated newspapers and monuments.
She had not worn a uniform. She had not commanded troops. She had not stood atop tanks or marched through capitals, yet her impact rivaled that of entire battalions. And still, she chose anonymity. For those who fight openly, peace brings rest. For those who fight invisibly, peace brings memory. Yelena carried the weight of Kube's death, the knowledge of reprisals, the faces of innocents lost, the understanding that one decision altered countless lives. But she never spoke of trauma publicly. She never dramatized her experience. She never sought sympathy. To her, heroism was not something to be claimed, only something to be endured. For decades, Yelena Mazanik's story remained incomplete in public history, not because it lacked importance, but because it was too uncomfortable. It challenged traditional ideas of warfare, gender roles in conflict, the belief that war is only fought by soldiers. A maid killing a general did not fit the narrative of armored divisions and battlefield heroics, so her story was often reduced, simplified, or ignored. Yet history cannot be complete without those who fought without uniforms. Yelena Mazanik's legacy is not defined by number of kills, length of service, or military rank. It is defined by something far rarer. She removed a pillar of Nazi occupation from inside the structure itself. She did not attack from the outside. She destroyed it from within. That makes her one of the most effective assassins in World War II, not in volume, but in consequence. Very few individuals changed the strategic course of a region through a single act. She did. Yelena's courage was not loud. It did not roar through machine guns. It did not explode through artillery barrages. It existed in remaining calm under surveillance, smiling while carrying a bomb, walking through corridors knowing discovery meant torture, living among murderers without becoming numb to humanity. That kind of courage is rare and far more terrifying to tyrants than armies.
Yelena Mazanik did not just represent resistance, she redefined it. She showed that women could infiltrate where men could not. Women could strike where armies could not. Women could shape wars without commanding soldiers. Her story shattered the myth that women were only passive participants in war. She was not a victim, she was a weapon. In an age obsessed with spectacle and noise, Yelena's story reminds us that the most powerful changes often happen quietly. The most dangerous enemies are not those who shout, but those who remain unseen. And the most effective resistance does not always wear a uniform. Her life teaches us that courage does not require visibility. Heroism does not require recognition. And sacrifice does not require applause. She stood against one of the most brutal regimes in history and won, not with armies, but with resolve. Imagine her walking through Kube's mansion one last time, not as a servant, not as an assassin, but as a woman who had already changed history. No one saluted her, no one stopped her, no one suspected her. And that is why she succeeded. Because sometimes the greatest victories belong not to those who are seen, but to those who are underestimated. Yelena Mazanik's story is not just a World War II story. It is a story about what courage looks like when no one is watching, what resistance means when survival depends on silence, and how history is shaped not only by armies, but by individuals who refuse to surrender their humanity. She did not conquer with force. She conquered with invisibility. And in doing so, she became unforgettable.